I went and listened to like all of Ainara's. By the way, she's related to George Lowell. I guess that's the reason why her last name's George. I don't know. Uh, he was part of a band called Little Feat. I I kind of like if I like somebody like I like her and I like her band, um, I might go and listen if I find out that she's like related to some other musician. I might go and listen to their stuff, but considering her father died when she was like 5, I think that would be kind of awkward, you know. And I mean, I would go and listen to them. I'm sure I would like them because I read that Frank Zappa considered, or actually, no, it wasn't Frank Zappa. It was Frank Zappa. His band was a part of Frank. I looked it up. I'm not sure if I want to go up and listen to the music because I don't know Little Feat, and I mean, I like lots of different music. I mean, I can't. I was born in '70, and uh, when I was born, that song uh, that by Mungo Jerry came out, and I really like that song. So I really like the music that was from that period, you know, and around there. I can kind of picture that if my parents had decided to have me whenever, at least my father was in his youth, in his 20s or so. He was 20 in 1950. So I could have been a baby boomer if my father had decided to have a family whenever he was in his 20s. But I was born when my dad was 40. And so, to some degree, I'm kind of a phantom boomer, you know. So if the kids call me boomer, then in my brain I'm like, okay, well, it would fit considering some of my tastes in music tends to go back beyond my birth. I think everybody does these days because I mean, even the people. But I'll probably look into it. I probably won't be as much of a fan of her father's as as I am of her and her music. And but I went over and I just listened to all the stuff that was just her, and she's really good. I mean, her stuff's really good. And but I also like the Bird and the Bee. And then I'm going to listen through their because I haven't really checked up in a while. I think the last time I would listen to them was like a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and they since then have put out a tribute album to Van Halen, and if you never heard their song Diamond Dave, then it probably wouldn't make any sense to you why she would they would go after doing a Van Halen tribute album. They also did a Hall & Oates tribute album. And she's like working with David Grohl, and she's got less subscriptions than I do, which doesn't make any sense because there's nothing special about me. And I mean, I don't have any popularity in the music industry or anything like that, or I don't know why the fuck people are subscribing. I think what it is that people are laughing at me. I think that's what it is. The kind of topics that I pick. I know some people claim that I've got a pretty good voice, but I kind of doubt that. And everybody knows my psychological state is that I don't believe any of this is real. But I'll just play it by ear, play it by tune, pretend I'm in the right quantum universe and the same one that I was born into. Because I watched this. I was watching this thing called The Moth, which is it's a great show where people talk on stage. And there was this guy that was talking and this is on my site on Rock Me Amadeus, but it's in the stories on stage channel or something like that. That's where the moth sits on my site, and I went into there and just, as it is on any channel on my site, is just you drop in and you don't know what's playing because it's playing whatever should be playing at this point in time based on the computation. That what it does is it takes the complete playlist duration, and then it divides it by, it does a modulus. It does the timestamp, the Unix timestamp modulus. So time close. If you're a PHP programmer, it's just time round brackets. So you just take the time value and divide, and modulus. You divide and you get the remainder of the playlist duration, and that determines what particular second, what particular part of what fraction of that playlist has been played before, and what you should be playing right now. And that's how every single playlist is in my site, and I call them channels because if you have it set up for autoplay, it'll just start playing at that particular time, and if you bring in a friend from someplace else, they almost get it at the same point. And the only reason I can do that is because the YouTube API lets me set the start and end points for the videos. And I was like, hey, if I can set start and end points for the videos, I can not only truncate the videos according to where I believe they should start and end, which is where there's no silence, but I can set it up to have the thing play at the precise time I can simulate a streamed output, and that's what I did with the site. And I've been designing and redesigning this site for about a decade. I did something like it about 10 years ago, and it wasn't quite as nice as that. What it did that was different was it would play a video, and then it would refresh the page and play another video, and refresh the page and play another video. It didn't use any JavaScript, and it worked so long as you didn't interrupt the video that was playing. And I had access to the API and all that stuff. I just didn't know. I knew that you could control the JavaScript player. The YouTube embed. I didn't know how to do it. And one day I just said, screw it, I'm going to figure out how this thing works. And I took all the examples they had of how to control the YouTube API, the player, and I just basically sucked out the source code for the API example, and I put it in some PHP, and then I just broke all the parts of it apart until I could get something that worked. And I haven't touched it since. I mean, there's bound to be somebody out there that can do it a whole lot better than I can. But if they looked at the source code that PHP code is generating on my site, they would shit. They would be like, fuck. It's like, this works? Then why should it work? Why have a case statement about 1,000 cases long? It's because it works. This is, why didn't you use an array? Because I didn't know how to use an array inside of JavaScript. JavaScript, as far as I can tell, has no arrays. And it says, well, why didn't you do blah or blah or blah? And I says, well, because I didn't know blah or blah or blah. JavaScript, as far as I'm concerned, is the most demented computer language in existence. And anybody who thinks that is a real computer language has never taken a course in computer science in their life, probably. And if they have, they've taken it after I was, it couldn't have been anybody before my time that took it and said, okay, this is relevant. Because it is the most demented. I mean, Pascal is much easier and more fun than JavaScript is. JavaScript is whoever made JavaScript was they knew they had to come up with the word JavaScript. They had to hijack the Java the popularity at the time in order to call it JavaScript, because that's exactly what they did. It bears no resemblance to Java whatsoever. Some of the problems it's gotten is the scoping for your variables makes absolutely no sense. People have tried to make sense out of it, and I mean, in C, you can adopt the variables of the global variables. I think you have to specify them, but I'm not sure. It's if you are within the scope. Okay, so you got your main function, and main function is where everything executes in C. That's the first function called in a C program is main, and in main, you may have you can set up a curly bracket, a left and a right, and then inside of that you can put var ABC, and then you can start using that variable. But the variable only exists within inside of those scopes, the curly brackets. Now you don't have those curly brackets associated with a function definition. You can do it outright. All you have to do to understand how to program in C is to go and look at the syntax tree that they've got for C. And if you understand the syntax tree, it basically says anything that you can do in the syntax, according to the syntax tree, because it's defined recursively, you can figure out how to write some really obfuscated C code. And so some of the tricks of writing in C is to understand all the crazy shit you can do in C that just doesn't make any sense. Like putting a curly bracket scope operators out in the middle of nowhere with no function associated with them. And then you can put a var ABC at the top of that. But you can't put any functions before before you declare your variables. So this is a trick in case you're like hacking C code, and for some reason you want to declare some variables and do some function out in the middle of the function or in the middle of the main function. You're just ad hoc adding some variables, and you want to do something there, but you don't want to do it anywhere else. You don't want to write a function somewhere else. You just put some curly brackets, put a var ABC, and then you can do your ABC thing, and then whenever it comes out of that, the var ABC doesn't exist outside of that scope. So nothing outside of that curly bracket can call anything else. Nothing inside the things inside of it can call out, but the stuff that's outside of it can't call in, unless you pass a point. Unless you use I think if you use a global pointer, like if in the main function you've got a variable pointer, so like an integer pointer, a pointer to an integer, and you point that pointer inside of the curly brackets because it adopts the global area, the global variable scope, or whatever it's inside of. You can probably attach a address to a variable inside of the curly brackets, because when you compile it, it should have. I don't know if every time it goes through the curly brackets it allocates the memory for the variables, or if the variables are only allocated and addressable inside of that. But you should be able to like point a pointer to it and then address the pointer, address the variable through the pointer. So you could pass variables outside of that curly bracket if you wanted to, but that's the only way. You have to declare it. Now in JavaScript, I don't know how it works, but to some degree, it sounds like there's no separation. There's no way of knowing exactly what's a global variable and what's internal to a certain scope, and and you can't really know what can access what, and it's really, I'd have to go and read into it several times. I'd have to go back and relearn my C, because I'm sure I've lost stuff since I got into PHP coding. I mean, I kind of understand how C works, but I've forgotten a lot of my pointer arithmetic and all that stuff. That, like if you make your pointer to a struct, or pointer to something other than an integer, and you assign it. If you assign a pointer to say an integer or something, and you want to go to the next integer in an array, one of the tricks is that you can add the pointer. You can say add pointer to +1, or I think it has to be. It's something like that. You just say add 1, and then automatically C figures out that you mean a multiple of the size of the integer, which might be a 32-bit integer. So adding 1 to it is going to be is 1 represented as a 32-bit 1, not 1 represented as an 8-bit 1. Of course, that doesn't make any sense to do it any other way, but that it would know to jump 4 bytes rather than to jump just 1 byte in an array, assuming the array is all contiguous. But it's probably not the case. It's probably that, well, I mean, virtual memory is always going to put you wherever you are, and you wouldn't know where you were, if it was contiguous or non-contiguous, or you wouldn't know what the operating system's going to do with your software and I mean, if you're running a hypervisor, or if you're running a simulation or anything, you wouldn't be able to figure out if the next byte in the array, or the next integer, or the next word or object or whatever is a precise distance in bytes. You wouldn't be able to figure out where the next one is. You could hack it, but it's dangerous to do that, because you don't know what they're going to do in the processor or in the operating system sometime in the future, because sometimes in the future it might change out from under you, and when your program's executing, it's executing on a processor that might change its behavior. That might not work like the original processor you used whenever you wrote your program. It might work a different way, and then whenever you do your math on that, it will come out incorrect and your program will crash. That's the reason why I really like the Amiga computers, is that the Amiga developers did not, the people that made the Amiga said, fuck it, we're gonna make a computer, and it's not going to have a memory management unit on it. And some people are saying, but you can't do that, because then if the program crashes, it crashes everything. And I said, yeah. And then, the developers are saying, okay, we'll just design an operating system that expects that the programmers that are going to be writing on this platform are going to be perfect, or going to have to be perfect, or they're going to have to use perfect languages. Like, they'll have to program everything in Lisp, and which is a crazy language. It's recursive. You can't address things inside of it without going through the main. I don't know enough about Lisp, but I can understand that if it's completely recursive, you execute from. I took Lisp in school. I just don't know what it's like these days, or what it is like to write it professionally. But I can imagine that it's to address anything inside of it, you have to have it executing, and you have to interact with the main loop, which will then figure out where you belong within inside of the Lisp program, and then any of the functions that you're calling are everything in Lisp is recursive, by the way. A for loop in Lisp is not represented as for x equals 1 to 100 do this. In Lisp it is you call the function and you give it 100 as your starting number, and it iterates it down to 0 and then returns out of the recursion. And so rather than saying 1 to 100, you could say you could have a function that says for 1 to 100, but internally what you're going to do is you're going to check to see if x is 0, and you're going to start at 100, and you're going to recursively call the function itself on a value of 100 minus 1, and so it'll be calling itself recursively. That means a function that calls itself. So if I'm trying to add 1,000 numbers together, just do a basic summation of 1 through 100, I could make a really simple function in any language, but in Lisp it's going to run perfectly. In other languages they'll probably crash if I did say 1,000,000 or 10 million or something like that, because what would happen in any other language when you recurse is that you're sucking off a bit of register memory from the processor, and you're throwing it on a stack for every time you call it. And after about, say, 10 million of those things, then basically your computer runs out of memory. On Lisp, this doesn't happen because it unravels the recursion and makes an iterative loop out of it. And so the recursion is a method of trying to create perfect program, a program that doesn't have any side effects. And side effects are considered like, say you're doing a for loop, and then all of a sudden somewhere in the middle of the loop you decide you want to go off and do something else, and you never come back to finish the for loop. Or say you do a for loop and you just happen to have access to a variable within the for loop, and you sit there and you're tweaking that variable inside the for loop that is such as x, and you're sitting there tweaking it, then it's going to do something that's outside of normal behavior, and so you have the possibility of creating errors, creating programs that hiccup and crash and do, and in Lisp you can't access specific memory. If you could access a specific address in memory, then you have the potential to create viruses, or to do go outside the lines of the memory. So that interpretive languages like Lisp only let you declare variables; they don't let you address them. And you address them, but you address them through other operators using CUDR and CAR, CAR and CDR. And the difference between the two is one takes the first item off of a list, because Lisp is a list processing language. It takes the first item, or what's called an atom, off the list, and the rest of the list it passes back. On the other, it goes the other way, and you do combinations of them, or actually one returns the rest and one returns the first, or something like that. And so you use CUDR and CARs to hone in on the specific atom you want out of a list, or you recurse to get to that point of the list. And it's just crazy how Lisp works. But the reason why it works that way is so that you have, the only way your programs would fail to work in Lisp is if there was a semantic problem that you didn't, and it would be completely obvious to you where the bugs were, because um, you know, it you would understand it, but with C, it's going to be much more difficult to find bugs. In Lisp, it's going to be much easier. Also, Lisp programs tend to be very small compared to C programs because you're using recursion and you're not using big wordy for loops and stuff like that. You're using functional recursion, and then you can write a language in Lisp, and then you can in that language execute Lisp programs that use Lisp. Uh, it's a beautiful language. It's just that I wish that I was a better programmer. When I look at Lisp, I just think I could be a better programmer and I could manage something like that, Or I could look at Python and I could say Python uses stuff like Lisp and like this and like that and like that, and I wish I could be really good at Python, but I end up being this idiot who goes for PHP, where everything is pre-declared in the language that you could possibly everything you could possibly use is already executing, and that's a bad news because if you've got thousands of those things executing, unless they're using something like what do they call it? Unless it's there's a word for it. It means that you can keep the executing program all the memory and data that pertains to it. Oh, resident. As long as it's resident. So the idea is that with a resident function or a resident program is that all the functions and everything are separated from the data, and when you execute the program, your instance or whatever is kept separate from the running code, and so you could have thousands of like little, and I think this is what they do with the Node.js, or this is what Java servlets do, is that you only declare the things you need for that servlet, but it only exists when you need it, and it doesn't load everything in its dog in order to operate. It's possible that they do this in PHP already, and that all that stuff exists. It's already in memory, but when your script executes, it inside PHP, they probably just have it running. They probably have the memory that's relevant to the script is located, and it's executing on a PHP engine that has all those resources available, but calls them like they were remote from the program. But it's possible that that's not the case, that all of that stuff is loaded up into memory, and if it's loaded up into memory, it's going to take forever to execute, and if it's calling all that stuff. That's the difference between a fast web program and a slow one. Is the slow one is loading all the stuff you're not even going to use, as well as the stuff you're going to use into memory. And so what it does is it loads in it loads up the PHP program, or the PHP language, and the PHP language loads in all of its modules, and it does all of this before it ever runs your script. In other languages, what you would do is you would have all that stuff already resident running or available for when it's needed, and so the PHP or whatever could be running all the time, and when your script needs it, or actually maybe you just bring up the PHP whenever a script is called, and then assume that for maybe several hours that PHP will be called some more, so you run it as a server and it's just sitting there, and then your script goes in there and executes on that service, then it would be fairly fast. But if you're running on a server where you're not using PHP a whole lot, or not, then it might load it up, take forever to load it up, run your script, then after, say, a few minutes, it lets go of all the memory for the PHP, and then you run your script again, and it loads up all that stuff up, and then it executes your script, and then it drops all that stuff after a certain amount of time. I would assume the idea behind resident memory or resident program is that it's always running, it's always available, and so you don't have to load it up. But the variables that pertain to your program are kept with your program, and it can't confuse your program with someone else's, and your two programs can't see each other. They don't even have access. You're sandboxed. Each one of the scripts are sandboxed. And so they have access to the resources, but they don't see all the other scripts that are running that also could have access to those resources and might have to share those resources. But anyhow, the thing is that you, for a really, my website, Rock Me on My Days, was not designed to have like 10,000 people hit it at once. And maybe someday in the future that'll happen, then I'll be in real trouble. But it was designed really just for me and maybe 100 or 1,000 people to run through it. It'll be funny to see if it ever does get popular, to see it just grind to a halt, and the people at GoDaddy will say, we're not going to be able to support this anymore. You're going to have to cough up $200 or $300 or $400 to get this thing back up and running. And then I'll be like, okay, well, that was nice and fun, and I'll just set up another site, call it something else, and put it somewhere else and not tell anybody about it, I really designed it for myself, and I guess what I would do is, if it ever got to the point to where it would nosedive and like go into the ground, I'll just put a password protection on it and make it so I'm the only one that can use it. But currently it's available to anybody to use, and I don't track the cookies. I don't do cookie crack. The reason why I don't is because I'm afraid of the idea that nobody ever uses it, just me. And so, even if it was, even if this YouTube thing takes off, I still don't trust that people are using that. And so it's kind of part of my ego problem that if I ever thought that people weren't using it, then I would probably put it somewhere else and, not let anybody have access to it, because I designed it for myself. I designed it for everybody, but I didn't really expect everybody would like it. And I just so that everybody has access to it, I put it out there. But I don't want to track usage. I don't want to put in login registration for people. I don't want people putting up their own playlists. I put the source code out there in case they ever want to figure it out. Most coders would probably just take the JavaScript it's generating and make their own. But the whole idea is it's just there to show how we can create our own MTVs and our own MTV experiences. I'll go onto my smart TV monitor, and I'll go up there to try out Pluto TV, and I'll get completely pissed off because of all the advertisements, and I'll say I can just go to my website, and there are no ads there, just the fucking banner ads that YouTube sticks in there they don't need. but they can't put regular advertisements, but they can put banner ads, which I fucking hate. And I mean, they make money off of advertisements, but not through my site. You know, my site's not going to be, and nobody's going to use my site to search for videos, which is part of the reason why I don't have video search on my site, is because if I did, then people would probably be coming to my site to search for videos, and because they knew that YouTube can't put advertisements on embeds. And so, and plus the other thing is that for that to really work, you have to be using their API to determine if the videos can be shown as on an embed. And then on top of that is that you're using your credits according towards that API, which then makes it really difficult to determine. I mean, if you've used up all your credits in a day, which can happen after you've done about 10,000 queries to check to see if the videos are embeds, then you've used it all, and then you can't use it anymore. So there's no point in me putting a search system in there unless I gave you access to all the stuff I've already searched for to see if it exists and put it up there. So I can't turn it into the kind of program that people would want, and I imagine that I would like, because YouTube won't provide me enough credits to do API searches on it. That's how they keep people from overloading their service, is by giving the developers, the people that are developing mashups, they only get a certain amount of credits. And if you want any more credits, then you have to put in like requests, and you have to give them lots of examples of where you need it and stuff like that. And you know, if YouTube was smart, what they would do is they would charge for more credits. And when people are creating mashups, charge more money for more credits, and say, well, you say you want 10,000 more credits, hey, I'll give it to you for $10. And then, you know, and rather than going through all that Yahoo stuff, and they might actually find out that there are other ways of making money without advertisements, you know. But they'll never see this video, you know. They've got millions of users, they'll never see this. So I could always think of other ways that YouTube could make lots of money, but they're, you know, as with everybody in corporations, they always have their own way of thinking about things, or they've already tried the stuff that I would suggest, or you know, but it always seems like you could do it better, doesn't it? You know, you could always make more money if you could just somehow connect. I mean, you could always make them more money by just connecting with their brain in a different way, and then say, can you just like get rid of the advertisements, but do this over here, we could make as much money as the advertisements. And that's, you know, business people don't believe that kind of crap, so it'll never fly, you know, because they're too distracted by what's always worked. And that's the problem with conservatism, is complacency. Conservatism, the idea is that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, if it's always worked, why do it differently? You know, and the liberals are like, there are so many other ways we could do it. And then the conservatives are like, yeah, there are so many other ways that we could fail. That's what they hear. And so, because success requires change, but not all change is success. You have to change in order to find success, but it's a risk, it's a risk to change anything. So by default, conservatives don't ever want to change if they don't have to. It doesn't make any sense to change or to go out and search or research stuff. If they research something, they're going to do it for a small amount of money, and until it works, then they're going to check to see if if they can make more money off of it and more money, and then they'll release it, you know. But they're not gonna change it in a big way. They might try this in a little program to see if people making YouTube mashups would pay for more credits. I haven't seen anything yet. I think the thing is that if people started buying into the credits, there's some people out there that say, well, if we bought into the credits and we need more credits, then YouTube will just come around and mow us down because they'll see that we're using tons. We've got lots of users or something that are using their YouTube. And then they'll start wanting to have a special thing going. You know, I don't know.